intellectual tidbits of the 21st century was developed by a chemical engineer working at an insurance company. The man was named Benjamin Lee Whorf, and together with his mentor, Edward Sapir, they developed the creatively named Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which proposes that culture shapes language, which in turn shapes our perceptions. The most commonly held example of the hypothesis is words for snow in the Inuit language, which presumably has more words for snow than in English. Because the Inuits have so many words for snow, this colors their perception of snow, whereas someone from Florida would view the white stuff as cold, foreign, and simply snow, an Inuit would view snow as a very particular type of snow. However, as Gregory Pullman notes in his 1991 publication, The Great Eskimo Snow Hoax, this is a misconception. In fact, there are just as many words for snow in the Inuit language as there are in English. As it turns out, what we teach students about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis in courses across the country is only quite literally the tip of the snowy iceberg. But the New York Times of August 27, 2010 introduces new linguistic research, reframing how we think about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Any steps towards understanding the role of language in perception are critical in a world of intercultural conflict. So, to gain a more complete picture of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, we must first examine what the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis actually includes. Second, delve into current linguistic research, shedding new light on the hypothesis. And finally, investigate implications of this new insight for academia and cultural understanding. First, we must build a common framework of analysis by examining what the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis actually includes. By first, looking at popular perceptions of the hypothesis, and second, examining what the hypothesis actually entails. First, an analysis of several intercultural textbooks reveals that a basic, cut-and-dry definition of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is that culture shapes language, which in turn shapes our perceptions. Another commonly held example of the hypothesis is the fact that in the Hopi language, there are entirely different words for drinking water from a container versus drinking water from a natural body of water. This finite difference in meaning proves that direct translation between two languages can be difficult, even when the subject is as simple as water. But just like the snow example, this only demonstrates a basic understanding of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. However, this common understanding of the hypothesis only scratches the surface of what Sapir and Whorf's brainchild actually includes. The October 2009 edition of American Anthropologist clarifies that the hypothesis goes a step further, to say that if a word for a concept exists in one culture, but not another, that second culture cannot comprehend the concept. Or in other words, if there is a word for a concept that exists in your culture, that does not exist in mine, I can't comprehend your culture. However, over the years, a growing amount of contradictory evidence chipped away at the validity of this component. For example, Mandarin Chinese makes no grammatical distinction between past, present, and future tense, but that does not prevent Chinese speakers from conceptualizing the past, present, and future when interacting with other cultures. In this manner, although English has no direct translation for the word Schadenfreude, that does not prevent English speakers from taking pleasure at other people's pain. In light of this contradictory evidence, communication scholars disregarded this component of the hypothesis. This lack of understanding manifests itself closely in the classroom. In one exercise, Hmong students were learning about American customs and values. But for the required exercise, which students had to prepare an American restaurant and menu, students and teachers had to take a different approach, namely, because the Hmong language lacks a word for restaurant, forcing the teachers to make up a word literally translated as house of food. For years, we did not understand the full context and full extent of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, forcing teachers to manipulate cultural understanding by literally making up words. However, current linguistic research is showing that Sapir and Whorf may not be as crazy as we thought they were. And needs to be revisited. This current linguistic research deals in two key areas: the language of space and gender articles. But first, gender articles are frequently an area of frustration for many students of foreign language. English conveniently refers to everything as the desk, the suit, the student. However, many languages utilize masculine, feminine, and even neutral articles in association with nouns. A case in point, Russian water is a she, and she becomes a he when you dip a tea bag into her. A study delved deeper into the concept of gender connotations by looking at the word bridge, which the German language treats as feminine, but is masculine in Spanish. When asked to describe the same bridge, Spanish speakers used a variety of masculine terms, but German speakers framed the bridge with more feminine connotations, such as slender and elegant. Using gender articles causes the speaker to view the inanimate world with nuances that English speakers are entirely oblivious to. Therefore, an obviously feminine German bridge would register as nothing but masculine to a Spanish speaker, and an English speaker would view it as just a normal bridge. The second area of research deals with the language of space. The Boston Globe of December 12, 2010, reports that some languages, in particular the Gugu Yimi Pur language in Australia, frames directions in terms of north, south, east, and west, instead of left, right, front, and back. These speakers possess an extraordinary sense of direction and can always tell the correct direction no matter where they are on Earth. Therefore, a Gugu Yimi Pur speaker would not understand a Westerner when speaking to them, who has a habit of using random gestures and doesn't regularly reference east when they mean right. Using gender articles and a different language of space paints a totally different portrait of reality than what Westerners are accustomed to, giving a little more credibility to Saphir and Whorf's brainchild. This new insight into the Saphir-Whorf hypothesis leads to implications for both academia as well as cultural understanding. First, we should not be so quick to dismiss theories such as the Saphir-Whorf hypothesis. In his 2010 publication, The Language Instinct, Steven Pinker declares there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that a speaker's outlook and worldview are influenced by language. Harsh words indeed, words that are now being reconsidered in light of this new insight into the Saphir-Whorf hypothesis. Considering our knowledge of the hypothesis was limited in the first place, it also raises questions of our knowledge of other communication theories, such as the inoculation theory and constructivism. Also, not only could our knowledge of these theories be limited, but in a worst-case scenario, we could be perpetuating a misunderstanding. Additionally, this insight gives us food for thought in the area of cultural understanding. Nelson Mandela once proclaimed, "If you speak to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. But if you speak to a man in his own language, that goes to his heart." Still, this sentiment might be easier said than done in light of this new perspective on the Saphir-Whorf hypothesis. In his 2010 publication, Through the Language Glass, Guy Deutscher notes, "A first step towards understanding one another is to realize we don't all think the same." In intercultural communication courses across the country, students are taught to bridge the communication gap between cultures, implying that these barriers are surmountable. However, these barriers are something that make ourselves and our cultures unique and should perhaps be viewed in a more positive light instead of something to entirely eradicate. This is not to say that the value of cultural understanding is futile. It's just a little more difficult than we anticipated. As my German professor, Dr. Johannes Strohschenk, once told his students, language is a reflection of people. After investigating what the Saphir-Whorf hypothesis actually includes, current linguistic research, and its implications for academia and cultural understanding, we can now present a more complete picture of the Saphir-Whorf hypothesis and melt away our previous preconceptions.